We'll get started in 2 minutes, and that's also a warning for those who are joining us online. We're streaming this. So if you don't want to be remembered for what you say, don't say it. I just got the go-ahead. Welcome to this session with the faculty. My name is Michael Chan. I teach in the Bible division. I am an ELCA Lutheran and have been, well, since I was baptized, I suppose, back in Kingman, Arizona. So welcome to this session, and I'm going to ask my colleagues here to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the Q&A conversation. So, please.
Hi. Is that?
Yeah, you're good.
Am I good? Great. I'm Cameron Howard. I'm an assistant professor of Old Testament, and this is my 4th year here at Luther.
My name is Amy Marga, and this is my 9th year at Luther Seminary, and I'm an associate professor of theology here.
Andy Keck, it's also my 4th year here at Luther Seminary. I'm the director of the library and director of institutional effectiveness.
I'm Carla Dahl. I'm professor of congregational and community care, and this is my 3rd year at Luther.
Okay, great. Well, the first question that we're going to engage is something that all of us, I think, are passionate about, and it is this. What do you, we'll start with the faculty, what do you as faculty see in your students this year that excites you about the future of the church? And keep in mind that this is meant to be a conversation and a dialogue, so why don't you kind of ponder that question as they're responding as well, and as they say things, maybe questions for you will come up about students, or maybe you want to make some kind of remark about what you see in the current batch of students. So. Why don't you begin? Carla, would you like to begin? It's right in front of you, so thank you.
I think 2 things. One, the passion that I see in students for the work that they're called to, for the populations that they long to serve, for just being able to live out their callings. And so individually I see that passion there, but then as a group, I'm really excited about the scope. When I see students that are serving in rural contexts or have a real heart for rural contexts in inner city, and I have students in Madagascar, from Madagascar and Nigeria and Liberia, and it's the world range of the students. When I think about the impact that they will have, it just feels exciting and humbling both to think of being able to somehow be in dialogue with them, shape their lives, and have them enrich mine too.
From my vantage point in the library, one of the things I notice is that our students are curious. They are often interested in looking beyond some of the things that they learn in class and doing research. And this is not just our PhD students, but even our MDiv and MA students are in the library, and they're trying to figure out some of the values and some of the foundational aspects of our faith. And I think part of that curiosity then it helps to serve them as they begin to think about what it's going to be like to engage their Christian communities as leaders. So how can they take the best values and foundations of our faith and be able to kind of interpret or translate or engage the communities that they're going to serve in the future? So I think it's wonderful to see that curiosity in our students.
Yeah, I want to second what Dr. Dahl said about the scope of our students. I do the distance learning course. I'm doing a distance learning theology course this semester, and we did a map of the class, and it's really interesting. We have a lot of Minnesotans, but we have California, South Carolina, Florida, Canada, Norway, South Africa. So we didn't know that. And I didn't realize that about the students going in, and that's really been an amazing thing for the classroom, in that students can bring to the class conversation, really where they are in their ministry contexts, and remind us that the gospel is being heard and preached in all kinds of different ways in different contexts. And then the only other thing I would say that excites me about our students at Luther Seminary in general is just that they, pretty much every student that is in my classes has had an encounter with the living God. And that's not always a given in religious departments and seminaries across the country. And that's a really great thing for students to come into a classroom saying, God's worked in my life, and now I want to go deeper. I want to understand that more, and I want to be able to share that story and then have people listen to how people share their stories about their encounters with the living God. So that's what makes teaching theology here exciting and makes our students today very exciting, because it's, again, like we live in a society that's not always a given that you're religious or that you go to church or that even you're a Christian. And so to have students come here with that very fundamental experience of the divine presence really is a great beginning for the classes that I have.
And I would add that our students have not bought the narrative that is so popular today that the mainline church is dying. They don't believe that, or they don't care. That they have, that they're excited to be here. As Dr. Marga said, this encounter with the living God animates them, and also they're ready to come do church and to see what doing church means in the 21st century, and to see what new things that will entail, and to, I think, in many ways, lead us and teach us. So we have a lot to offer them, but I think they also have a lot to offer us. And finally, I would also just say that they are so engaged in the world and in communities. Our students come with very sort of, with a lot of awareness of where the church could be doing better in the world right around them, and they're eager to get out there into the world and into their local communities and do those things. And so, it's just they bring so much passion and excitement. They're great to be around.
And now I wonder if there are comments from the audience or questions about the student body as it stands, or emerging students. Yes, sir. And you know what? Why don't you state the question, and then I'll restate it into the mic so we don't have to fool around with the cord. Yeah, so the question for the faculty members is, where did you get your education from? So.
I went to Davidson College in North Carolina. I am Presbyterian, PCUSA. Went to Davidson College, went to the Candler School of Theology at Emory University for an MTS, to Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur, Georgia for a THM, and then back to the Graduate Division of Religion at Emory for my PhD.
I am a graduate of Concordia St. Paul. I have my undergraduate degree in Christian education, and then I got my MDiv and my PhD from Princeton Theological Seminary in New Jersey.
I went to Albion College in Michigan, and then went to a seminary out in Boston University School of Theology, and then the library school at Clarion University of Pennsylvania.
I got my undergraduate degree at Bethel College, which is now Bethel University here in St. Paul, and in English literature, which they said was a very versatile degree. You could do anything with an English lit degree, like go to school. So I did at University of St. Thomas, and then got my doctorate at the University of Minnesota, and before coming to Luther was dean at Bethel Seminary for 20 years.
Other questions or comments? The topic is specifically students. Go ahead. If you just shout it out, I'll restate the question. Yeah. I didn't hear the last part of the question. What was the actual question at the end? Oh, okay, right. So the observation was that all the students seem to be extroverts, all the faculty seem to be extroverts, and can an introvert actually be a student here?
And as a dyed-in-the-wool introvert, I can say we have introverted faculty members and we have introverted students. And remember that introversion is kind of about where you get your energy and how you kind of recharge. And so for some of us, that's where we really must structure our days and our time so that we have time alone, time with God, time, to renew. And I work with students who wonder the same thing. Can I, as an introvert, be an effective minister? Yes, yes, and yes. I happen to know that Jesus' Myers-Briggs was INFP, so it's we're good there.
Some of the introverts hang out in the library, so.
Yes, please. Sure. Yeah, so there's a question about the distributed learning program, and I think, Amy, were you going to take that up?
Yes, I was referring to current students right now who one student, they're in the MDiv program, and they're both actually working in churches getting their MDivs. One's in South Africa, one's in Norway. Yes, they're getting their MDivs. Yes. And yes, we have a growing distance learning population, and our program requires that distance learners come to campus. Is it twice a year, right? They have to come twice a year. They have to come January and June for residential courses, and then they do the rest online. So they do have to spend some time here, actually quite a significant amount of time here, but they are taking other courses online in the MDiv program.
Oh, yeah, someone want to take on the cohort?
Yes, from the beginnings of the program, these distance learning students were put together in cohorts so that they would kind of travel through the distance learning program together. And that was a way for them to have community online, but also I think as a way for us to manage it a little bit, because we were, earlier on, we were not offering too many courses online. So the students would kind of stick together in their groups. And most of those cohorts are still together. Because we're offering more offerings online, some of the cohorts, people jump off the cohort, jump in. So there's a little bit of fluidity in the cohorts now, but yes, that's one avenue for these groups of students and cohorts. Yeah.
And I would add, too, that there are a couple of things that I've learned from our distance learners, our distributed learning program. And one of them is, I was going to, or I have now taught Hebrew online. And when they first told me that I needed to teach Hebrew language online, I thought, how in the world is that going to work? How am I going to do that? How am I not going to have them in front of me doing drills, multiple times a week? How is that going to work? And the distributed learning students are so incredibly committed and self-directed, and they take, because they have these lives, that they're working, many of them full-time, they have families, and they have made this commitment to do this degree in the place where they are. And so that some of my best Hebrew language students, or most committed certainly, have come from the distributed learning program because they know how to carve out time every day to do their drills and things like that. I've just been very pleasantly surprised by that. And would also say, as I mentioned already, that our distributed learners are embedded in some sort of context, many of them already working in churches. And so they bring these amazing stories and this wealth of experience to those courses, and really provide a richness in the classroom experience that is different from the also very good richness that we get from having residential students together.
We had a comment here in the second row. Go ahead. I'll restate your question. Yeah.
All right.
Or comment.
So you guys know, distributed learning.
Children, Youth, and Family?
Children, Youth, and Family is another program. And the summer. We do the
Yeah.
summer course, and then we do all the
Right, so there are multiple courses that one can do online, ranging from the Master of Divinity through the MA and down to the certificate program. So thank you for bringing that. Yes? The question was, do the international students more generally come to campus as well?
If they're in the MDiv program, my understanding is that that's a requirement. Every MDiv student is. So I just started with this particular class with those two students, so I'm going to assume that they're going to show up in January. But yes, that is the requirement that they come. I do think the guy in South Africa is an American living down there, working in a South African Lutheran church, and yeah, so yeah.
Well, I think now would be a good time to enter into the second question, and let me just read that out loud, and then I'll give our panelists an opportunity to respond. There have been dozens of books written and edited by Luther Seminary faculty, some of whom are before you, as well as countless contributions to leading theological journals. How does your research and writing directly inform what you teach in the classroom?
In two ways. The research that I have done primarily has been in looking at the maturity and well-being of seminarians. I was fortunate to be part of a longitudinal study, which is pretty rare. We followed seminarians for 11 years, looking at the ways that they changed while they were at seminary, hoping that they would change while they were at seminary. And that focus on formation, how do we provide spaces that both provide enough safety for people to allow God to form them, and enough challenge, so that it's not just comfortable, but it's challenging, and that invites the richness of a person's experience. So that research helps me think about what I'm seeing in front of me in the classroom, what I'm seeing in front of me when I'm talking to a student individually, when someone comes and is wrestling with a concept, but it turns out they're really wrestling with something from the past, or wrestling with something that they believe God is calling them to, and they just don't want to do that. But that process of formation has been a focus of my research, and shows up all the time as I'm thinking about what I'm doing in the classroom, and who I'm engaging and how I'm engaging those students. The process of doing research at all just makes me humble. I realize how many wonderful questions there are. It makes me feel really mortal. I won't be able to answer hardly any of them so because I'll run out of time. But the fascinating ways of being able to explore and to challenge myself, to be in conversation with great dialogue partners, both here at Luther and from the past, people who are thinking really well and deeply, challenges me to think really well and deeply. And so the process of doing research is a great gift, to have a faculty load where I not only teach, but I get to learn, and I'm expected to learn. It's one of the amazing gifts of being able to be a part of a faculty.
I started my career about 20 years ago, and started that career in theological librarianship, wondering about what theological librarians thought about their callings. And so did a research project on that while I was yet in library school, and got a couple articles out of that. And since then, I think it continues to be research is an area, in writing and speaking, other opportunities like that, allow me to really think deeply about a question. So as I was imagining becoming a theological librarian, that first question was, how does that fit in with my calling, right? What does that have to do with vocation? And how do my colleagues in that field begin to think about that? But now, I think as libraries and librarians continue to change, my research and thinking is more now thinking about the value of libraries. How do we articulate that as technology changes? And then also, how does research change with that change in technology? How my colleagues at this table do research differently than they did 20 years ago? And so those are the kinds of questions that I'm looking at today.
My research has been across in two different ends of the spectrum. I did my PhD on a Swiss Reformed thinker named Karl Barth, who's very important for classical Christianity, 20th century theology, and I've been very involved in Barth academic circles here as well as in Switzerland, and I also have just spent many years working in feminist theology and have just started doing work in motherhood studies, and so it's like just what's I think what my scholarship contributes to my teaching in that I feel that I can help translate some of the sort of white male European thought forms of a Karl Barth, actually of the whole tradition, to women who are interested in theology and think theologically, but as well, like with my knowledge of feminist theology, to really help men see that women have particular experiences in life where God is present with them. They also have particular language about who God is, and we have different life experiences and different ways of knowing. And I didn't mean to be like the bridge between like men and women in theology, but my scholarship has put me in that kind of position where I can really help our female students really see that there's classical expressions of God still matter, but women have something to say about their experiences and God in those experiences as well. And so that's been actually pretty exciting to bring both of those streams into the classroom and see what happens. So it's been a very fun thing for me. And I am very grateful that Luther is still a place that emphasizes scholarship and academic work, and it allows us and encourages us as faculty members to be part of those guilds and those circles. And really, without Luther's encouragement, it's very easy to kind of let some of that go to the wayside because there's so many other things to do. So it's been a really important piece, not only for my own vocation, but also to be able to bring sort of some of this some of these academic and scholarly questions that are very practical and personal and deep to the classroom.
My research is under the sort of broad heading of the Bible and Empire. And so very directly, I now teach a class called The Bible and Empire. So in that way, the research that I do, thinking about two things. One, how the empires, the imperial structures that you see reflected in Scripture. So when ancient Israel was a colony of Persia, or what did it mean to pay tribute to the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and how did that affect the way the Bible was written? Then also, how was the Bible used in modern imperial projects? So I think about that in two ways. So that research has given rise to courses and, of course, units and courses, but also then teaching that stuff in the classroom has affected my research. So this summer I did research looking for Minnesota examples. So Minnesota missionaries, particularly Reformed Presbyterian and Congregationalist missionaries like William Boutwell. I don't know if any of you know his work. He accompanied Schoolcraft on his expedition to find the head of the Mississippi and was instrumental in naming Lake Itasca. He was the one who knew the Latin to put that together. Anyway, I'd love to talk to you about that sometime, obviously. But reading journals of some of these 19th century Minnesota missionaries and thinking about how they used Scripture to think about evangelism and mission work and colonization of the Americas. And so it's been very exciting to have student interests and sort of local examples drive the kind of research that I do. I think it works both ways.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from the audience regarding teaching and research in the classroom? Yeah. Oh boy, how do you choose what you're going to research? Well, dear colleagues. I was hoping for a little bit of Schadenfreude at that point, but so I'm a student of Terry Fretheim. And I think my answer I think would be his. He would say that the classroom is the most important laboratory for research. I think that's what he would say. Because the questions that are being asked there are almost certainly being asked in the church. And so he would always talk about how he would never write a book and then teach the class. He would write the book while he taught the class. And the class itself would be a place where he could work out those ideas. And so for me, I want to make sure that my research is something that is emerging from within the classroom itself, because I know at that point, if I consistently feel like that's the case, then I know I'm hitting on something that at the very least the students are asking, and that one can almost guarantee the church more broadly is asking. So yeah, that's how I would say. Thank you, Terry Fredheim. He's not, I'm sure he sat on panels like this many years before us.
That was a perfect answer. Here's another one. There is, for me, the things that I have been able to explore more deeply, which is another way of talking about research, is because of the collaboration that's possible. Because I have been in relationship with people who are really thinking interesting things about important stuff, and then I get invited to play with them, and that kind of collaborative process is one way that research questions present themselves. The other thing for me is my questions come out of my story, my life story. You know, it's kind of like, what am I still wrestling with? What have I not figured out? And that sounds kind of self-absorbed, and I find that other people are also wrestling with those similar questions. So one of the first research questions that I asked in my own independent research was, how do families define and express spirituality? And I wondered that. I grew up in a pastor's family, you know, and I was reading research that said spirituality is a family strength, you know, and religion is a family bonding characteristic. And I was thinking back to all the suppers that had been interrupted because Dad got a phone call from someone in crisis, often about a family thing. And church was not helping. And so the question of, you know, my experience kind of challenging what I was reading in the literature just made the question get really lively and sparky for me. And so I think that God offers questions to us, to all of us. And we do research in different kinds of ways. You know, some of you talk to your friends and you wrestle with deep kinds of questions. Some of you read widely and deeply about a particular topic. We are all offered questions. And I think it's part of our calling as creatures to explore what it is that the Creator is holding out to us. So it's really it's fun, and the questions come from unexpected places.
And so the question was, does Luther put any limits on what one could research?
Oh, I think that, I'm not sure if there's anything spoken or formal about that, but I do think it's among the faculty. I feel like pretty much everybody to an individual believes that they are here doing theology for the church and for a living Christian community, and not just doing scholarship for scholarship's sake. And I would say that's true for all of our colleagues, and it's, I think, true for me too, is when I think about my scholarship. I mean, it's not that Luther has asked me to do certain things, although they have asked us to research certain things, but that really our own sense of calling being at a seminary is that we believe that there's a living Christian community that is asking similar questions that we are. So that, I think, is how I would, you know, I don't know if anyone else got some kind of letter in the mail about what you're not allowed to research.
No, nothing like that. Sometimes our students, though, will want to research something that we have not studied as much. And so, you know, we have doctoral students who want to explore new things in greater detail than we may have done in our own work. Or we have students, you know, if I have a student who says, well, I really want to write my MA thesis on masculinity in the books of Samuel and Kings, or I want to write on trauma theory in the book of Jeremiah. Well, I've got to get reading on some trauma theory in order to be able to help them. So I think that you know, our commitment to our students and our students' work in the church also drives the kinds of things that we sometimes end up going places we didn't think we were going to go in our research.
Those are great questions. Let's turn to our third and final question. As you all know, Luther Seminary is a deeply Lutheran place, as the name suggests. But I think that the seminary has found over the years that Lutherans can be better Lutherans when they do their theology in the presence of those who are not Lutherans. And that is, in the presence of those who come from different faith traditions. And so the panel up here represents a kind of variety of traditions. There are a couple Lutherans thrown in there, some other, some other sorts. And so the question is this: you're from different faith traditions, referring to the four of you. Talk about how important it is to have diversity of faith and thought in the classroom. So I would invite you all to respond to that.
Down the line. So as I think I mentioned, I'm Presbyterian, PCUSA, and one reason that it's important, I think, certainly for our faculty to be diverse is because we're getting more and more ecumenical students. So I had a student in my office just this week who's Christian Reformed Church, and she said, can I come talk to you about what it's like to be Reformed at a Lutheran school? Because she said, I hear these phrases that I understand to be Lutheran, like theology of the cross, but she's in her first semester. And, what does that mean? And how do I relate to that as a Reformed person? And so to be a resource for some of those students and to do some interpretation and to talk about what I have found very vibrant about the Lutheran tradition that has taught me and fed me here is really important. And then those same students will bring different perspectives on theology, on reading scripture, different experiences to the classroom. And there's just a way that difference in the classroom is always a place of dynamism. It means that people have to confront, all students from all traditions sort of confront, well, why is it, in fact, that I'm Presbyterian, or I'm Lutheran, or I'm Baptist, or I'm Episcopalian? Or what?
Born that way.
So why am I staying that way? Right. Why am I entering this church? And so to have those dialogue partners really helps. Certainly that's been my experience, again, as a Presbyterian in a Lutheran place, is to learn more from the other tradition and then also understand better why I am in my tradition. And so, I think it makes a really dynamic classroom experience.
So I am one of those Lutherans who uses jargon in my classrooms, sadly. No, I agree with everything that Dr. Howard said, but I would also say for me, teaching with a variety of students from faith traditions and ethnicities and cultures, is that really brings up a conversation of how the gospel is being spread in the world in a variety of ways. And the Christian church is a very, very big church with a lot of variety in it. And when we can have conversations about the way the gospel has been appropriated by Reformed thinkers, by Calvinists, by Catholics, it broadens our imagination about how God has worked in the world and is working in the world. And it also gives us practice, I think it gives our students practice on reaching across those borders, because we see more and more. I mean, anybody working in like the National Council of Churches or any other kind of pan-church body from different denominations, you need a little bit of practice in that and listening to those other professionals from other denominations and other faith traditions. So I think it's the most honest way of being Christian here, I think, on some level, in that it acknowledges that the gospel moves across the globe in a variety of ways and has done that historically. And that's a conversation that is absolutely worth having for us today, being faced with the challenges we are in the 21st century.
I am the one of the Methodists on the faculty. And there's two of us, so in fact, I am an ordained deacon in the United Methodist Church, and on my mom's side, we go back into the 1790s in Methodist clergy. So I am deeply Methodist. Talking about being born that way, clearly there's something in the gene pool. But a couple things just in response to this question. One is one of the initiatives that we've started here is something we're calling the Methodist House of Studies, which is a place for Methodist students to gather together because there's maybe 20 some within the student population gather together to talk about Wesley and other kinds of kind of Methodist structures and that kind of thing. And part of the vision for that too is also to help create a place where both Methodists and Lutherans can be in dialogue to one another. I mean, we are in full communion, the LCA and the UMC. There are things happening kind of at a national and world level, but sometimes there's a Methodist church that's right across the street from the Lutheran church. So what are some ways that we can work together, whether it's in helping each other in confirmation or Vacation Bible School or do some kind of outreach ministry? Those things are happening more and more, and so to create places where those conversations can begin, we think is important here. The second thing, just around the diversity of kind of faith traditions, as librarian, I curate a variety of faith traditions in the books that we collect in the library. And these are resources not only for our own students and faculty, but resources for the community, resources for alumni, resources for anyone in the upper Midwest pretty much. That we have folks all over that come in to use our collection. And so there are a variety of voices that we bring to that. We can only have so many faculty here, and so we're able to kind of expand even beyond the faculty voices to include voices. Just 3 books that I bought yesterday. One was on faith in Ferguson, kind of a reflection about some of the incidents down in Missouri. Another one was on the growth of Christianity in China. And then the third one was on Scandinavian pietism by our own Mark Granquist. So just get a variety of voices that are part of, help to enter that conversation.
They put a limit on Methodists here and also on Baptists. I'm one of the 2 Baptists, and I think it's wise, probably. But my Scandinavian pietism is my heritage. My paternal grandparents and great grandparents were Lutheran Norwegians, and so that's my father kind of wandered a little bit from the fold, but that the richness of difference in our own stories, I think, is helpful for us in thinking with our students about how to encounter difference. And the challenge for me, I shouldn't call it a challenge, the invitation is to think more carefully and clearly and sharply about my own theological commitments in the presence of people who think carefully about their theological commitments, and we sharpen each other. So I think that serves us well as a faculty. I also think it in the classroom, it requires that we offer hospitality. And there's the ability to welcome the other, not to demand that they become like us before we welcome. And that can only deepen ministry for our students, as if they leave able to offer hospitality, deep hospitality to others. Our curriculum is structured around promise, community, and neighbor, and I think that sense of being able to hold really clearly and sharply our own convictions, and yet with humility, to be able to say, this is what I'm committed to, this is how I see it, this is how I understand God and how God works in the world, and I also need to learn from you. I need to hear how you think about that. That will, because I can't possibly know everything I would love to know about God or the way God works. So it's so enriching, and I think for me personally, with my colleagues, and also I get to and need to model that for students and expect that from students, that they will be hospitable to people who are different in many kinds of ways. And that's, I think, what they will, that's the future of the church depends on that, I think.
I think we should have Michael chime in on this one too, because he's a cradle Lutheran.
Yeah, oh, sure, I'd be happy to. Every summer I've had the honor of teaching at North Central University, which is just down the road. It is, get ready for this, Assemblies of God. That's right. And so I spend a couple weeks every year with Pentecostals. And usually a day or two before I take that class, or I teach that class, I have to do some code switching in my mind. I have to intentionally say, you are going to live and spend intense time among a community that for about 6 or 7 years, I had a kind of detour among the Pentecostals and Charismatics, very positive for the most part, and I remember it positively. There might be some psychological issues that Carla can help me with there, but I remember it positively, and I draw on that often. And I found that, just like I said in the introduction, I am a better Lutheran when I know how to communicate my theology in other dialects. It's a theological dialect. So when I can talk about the theology of the cross to Pentecostals, that's a good thing. We are better theologians, I think, when we can do our theology in the presence of others and when those others do not speak our dialect, our own theological dialect. So I value both international students and ecumenical students because they help me become a better Lutheran theologian. And I think as an institution, they help us become a better Lutheran institution, but also a Lutheran institution that is open and welcome to an ecumenical audience. So that kind of brings us up to 4:09, really right up to the end of our session. So I think I want to begin by thanking our panelists here. Thank you all. And then also thanking you for your participation both today and at other times as you seek to contribute in the life of this community. So I hope the rest of your evening is blessed. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thanks to our online audience.